bring in Peter MacKay, former Foreign Affairs Minister, National Defence Minister, and longtime MP from Nova Scotia, of course, as well. Hey, Peter, good to see you. Thanks for your time. Can I get your reaction to that defection?
Yeah, very surprising, Todd. I know Chris d'Entremont well. In fact, I campaigned with him less than 6 months ago during the election campaign, where he said lots of things, as you would expect, about the people he's now sitting with. So it's disappointing for sure for Conservatives. I think broadly it leads to more cynicism as well. I mean, the timing of this is more than suspect. It has everything to do with getting this budget passed. And, you know, I'm not going to heap recriminations on Mr. d'Entremont. He's going to have to go back to his constituents in Nova Scotia and people in his community who worked for him and try to explain this.
The other thing I'm curious about is what does it say for Pierre Poilievre and his leadership, Peter? Because there is a review coming up for Pierre Poilievre in January.
Well, I mean, this may cause some questions, but I think Mr. Poilievre has a lock on the party. I think this review will go in his favor, you know, unless there's something else that happens. But I think this defection, we've seen this type of thing before. It usually comes from an individual who's disgruntled, but make no mistake about it, you know, he was lured and he was very much promised something to come across and join the Liberal Party.
All right. Now, let me ask you about national defense. This is a portfolio you knew very well. You served as Minister of National Defense of the Harper government. A lot of money going out the door for Canada's military, 81.5, give or take, billion over the next number of years. Big, broad strokes, if I can get from you, sort of the takeaway here. What does it mean?
Yeah, as you said, it's welcome news for the military. It's welcome news for our allies, including the Americans. This is money that will be spent in many different areas, including for personnel salaries. It'll help with recruitment and retention. It'll help with some of the equipment. And there's a carve-out, as you may have seen, with respect to military equipment, investments in the future capabilities of the Canadian Armed Forces. The challenge, Todd, will be, and I've experienced it at the department when we were in Afghanistan, is to actually spend it, and to spend it fast enough to be able to buy big, complicated pieces of equipment that have a long supply chain.
So I think right now,
and so it's one thing to throw a number out there, and it's encouraging. It's certainly lifted spirits in a lot of sectors in the defense industry as well. But it's much more challenging to push it through the bureaucracy in Ottawa and make those things happen. And so, you know, my grandmother used to say, many a slip between the cup and the lip. We'll see how the execution goes. That's going to be the challenging part. And promising money out 5, 10, 15 years, which we've seen, is also something that's beyond really the capability of this government to do.
Does it mean, and I think you alluded to it a moment ago, but that NATO allies will start to take Canada more seriously, Peter?
I certainly hope so. But again, it depends on how we show up and how we're effective in actually, pardon the pun, pulling the trigger on getting new submarines, getting new equipment, artillery, armament that'll put us in the game. A lot of it as well, I'm quick to add, Todd, is earmarked for the Arctic, and that's also very welcome news. That's a big vulnerability for Canada, for North America, something that our American friends and those at NORAD are very concerned about. Again, very difficult to build and put infrastructure and get the necessary capabilities, including missile defense, which will cost much more than the $1 billion that's been earmarked.
Yeah, and when people at home, Peter, are looking at this and they say, wow, you know, $82 billion, that sounds like a ton of money. But, you know this. How much is that really? I mean, it is a ton of money. But in terms of, you know, defense and spending on subs and planes and missile defense and security in the Arctic, I mean, that money goes pretty quickly, doesn't it?
It really does. And, you know, we are currently spending less than 2%, closer to 1% now. So doubling the defense budget is making up for years of neglect, as you alluded to. And it will depend on how quickly these, as I said, large, expensive pieces of equipment and military material can be added to the arsenal, that is the big footprint that we see here across the country at bases and places where they train and live, and to increase with things like jets and submarines and new ships that are currently being constructed. Big question, I think, on the part of many is how much of this equipment will be built in Canada, and how does it tie into the larger industrial strategy to get people back to work?
Something else I'm curious about, maybe you can explain this, the whole procurement process, and it gets very complicated, but it's like, okay, we've got the money, but you can't just go out tomorrow and buy 30 F-35 jets and 10 submarines. I mean, they've got to be built, takes a long time. There's a lot of planning and process that goes into this, so it takes years and years and years, and there's a whole lot of bureaucracy involved, I imagine.
That's exactly right, Todd. It's not like you can go out to Canadian Tire and buy these off the shelf. They do have to be built. In many cases, they're built elsewhere, which will be the case with submarines and fighter jets. And we have departments involved in this process of procurement that are kind of cross-threaded. You have Public Works that want the perfect contract, impossible. Industry Canada want every nut and bolt made in Canada. That's not always possible. You have the Treasury Board combing over every dime that's allotted, and Defense that need and want the equipment right away. So many competing bureaucratic agendas, and a lot of people who really need to be ordered by the Prime Minister to move quickly. That's not easy to do. Even in a time of war in Afghanistan, we found it very difficult to procure equipment quickly unless we could, frankly, go out and find a country that was willing to part with it, which is what we did with tanks.
Peter MacKay, former Minister of National Defense, Justice. Good to have you with us, Peter. Much appreciated.
Always a pleasure, Todd. Take care.